This is episode number 180 of the Guns Magazine podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast, one of the shooting world's biggest gun talk programs. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting, hunting, law enforcement, and the firearms industry. But before we get started, let's hear a word from our sponsor, 4 Patriots. Let's face it, if you don't have electricity, you're living in the Stone Age. But with the Patriot Power Sidekick from 4 Patriots, you get a solar generator that doesn't need installation. It's quick, easy, and portable on the go or even inside. The Patriot Power Sidekick solar generator is small, about the size of a lunchbox, but it's powerful. Powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, or even a mini fridge. The setup comes with a free solar panel, free shipping, a 365-day satisfaction guarantee, and, best of all, you get 10% off your first purchase by typing in the code GUNMAG at checkout. Just go to 4patriots.com and use code GUNMAG to get 10% off your first purchase of the Patriot Power Sidekick or anything else in the store. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code GUNMAG. I'd also like to share a word from our supporting sponsor, Creedmoor Sports. Creedmoor Sports is your destination for all things precision shooting. Whether you're new to the sport, an experienced target shooter, or a die-hard competitive shooter, Creedmoor Sports has what you need to take your game to the next level. Visit creedmoorsports.com. Today, we're going to have an instructional episode in which I talk about something that will elicit the occasional snicker, but probably tell you something you didn't know. We're going to talk about dealing with naked people in a self-defense situation. As I say during the episode, I've been a police officer for a long time, and I also worked a concert venue for decades where I've seen every sort of chemically fueled immorality known to man. Thus, I've been in a scrap or two with naked folks, and I'm going to share some hard-earned tips. Now here's my thoughts on how to fight a naked guy. Thanks for joining us on what is undoubtedly one of our more unusual podcast episodes. I was sitting in the backyard when I, for some reason, thought of this topic, and here we are. I'm going to talk about fighting naked guys. You know, dealing with naked people is something you never really hear talked about unless it's in relationship to, say, an adult ballet establishment that is equipped with a non-aviation related runway. But seriously, it's a serious problem if you've ever had to deal with it, and after spending many years as a cop, I have dealt with it. I've seen the problem firsthand, so to speak, and I'm going to show you how you can deal with it if you ever have to in a self-defense or CCW kind of situation. Now, you may be saying, I'm never a cop, I'm not going to have to deal with this. I will tell you a story from this past week in Indianapolis. For some reason, a guy was naked and had a handgun and was shooting at passing cars on the north side of town. He actually hit one person and blinded them. They later found him. He had ditched the gun, but as I believe the newspaper account said, he was experiencing a mental health and or drug intoxication problem. No kidding. Well, let's talk about this. Now, I'll be the first to admit nudity is both funny and distracting. Sometimes it's really embarrassing, especially if you're talking about me in a Speedo. But it's a fact of life, and if you're a prepared American and like to take responsibility for your own well-being and self-defense, it's something you might confront someday, so we're going to talk about it. You know, the problem with dealing with a naked person is you just kind of get wrapped around the axle thinking about all of the other factors aside from just how do I remain safe. And I'll tell you, I realized this the day I was confronting a very well-endowed and very attractive young lady who was naked in her bathtub. I didn't immediately see the big butcher knife she was holding. She was in the midst of a crisis, and fortunately, we resolved this situation, but I later kind of got the shakes when I realized she could have gave me a new belly button, and I might not have known it until it was too late. So I think that little incident right there just shows the big problems in dealing with naked folks. And again, if you say, well, I'm not a cop, I'll never deal with this, you might. You might run across somebody in your front yard. You may have a friend that's having some kind of crisis, or maybe even a family member. The biggest problem in dealing with a naked person is the fact that they're almost always drunk, high, experiencing a mental emotional crisis, or all of the above. Now, you might occasionally run across, say, an elderly person or a youngster who's got some type of handicap and is presenting no threat. But I'm telling you, if you see a naked person on the street, you need to consider them dangerous until proven otherwise. Let me reiterate and highlight this most important point. We'll double underline it verbally and with a couple of air quotes. Anybody who's naked should be considered dangerous until proven otherwise. Now, I've told you I've been a police officer for 30 years and dealt with my share of naked people, as have most cops, firefighters, EMTs, and medical personnel. But more importantly, I worked at a major concert venue for nearly 20 years, and during that time, I couldn't even tell you how many naked people I've had to fight or take into custody from both sexes. Now, I'll tell a couple of war stories, operational debriefs, to kind of give you a sense of where I'm coming from. One of my favorite naked people moments was when a young man was going to be taken into custody by the Drug Task Force for selling them a whole bunch of drugs out of his handbag. When they tried to arrest him, somehow his loincloth came off, and now you had about 10 police officers chasing a completely naked man across the gravel parking lot. When they finally caught him and tackled him, he went down, and as you can imagine, he didn't fare too well. The term road rash comes to mind, but it didn't seem to bother him, and the fight was on. There was another time they brought a guy into the security office who was having a drug overdose, basically. We got him in handcuffs after a tremendous fight, and he started flopping like a trout on a griddle. It was the darndest thing I've ever seen. This guy who was laying on his face on the concrete floor as we were waiting for medics and the paddy wagon, he was lifting 2 to 3 feet in the air and coming down on the concrete. And it wasn't doing him any good, but as soon as we'd go in there and make him stop and we'd stand back and let him go, he began doing it again. A little bit later, he also started kicking and fighting, and one of a friend of mine who was probably one of the largest land mammals in existence, and it's all muscle. This guy kicked him, and my friend went to do what is known as a common peroneal strike, which is the nerve bundle right above the outside of your knee. And typically, most people, you strike that very hard and one or both legs will collapse. This particular guy took that shot, which probably should have ripped his leg off, and he just looked up and said, "Are you happy? I just shit myself." Well, he had. And suddenly nobody is holding him down. He's just laying there on the floor in his own filth, flipping and flopping and just being a problem. So none of us got hurt. He was the only one that injured himself. But you can see when you're dealing with people that are naked, there's something else going on there usually. Let's take a very short break and talk about craft holsters. If you believe there's nothing better than the smell of freshly crafted leather, then check out Craft Holsters. Their custom leather holsters are your ticket to the ultimate concealed carry experience. They fit over 2,200 different guns. Visit craftholsters.com for more info. Now, I will admit, on rare occasions, sometimes people take their clothes off just because. I'm reminded of the professional adult dancer, as they're called, who lived in our jurisdiction and was constantly fighting with her boyfriend and would call the police to have us come and referee their domestics. And she would always answer the door naked as the day she was born. And she was, again, a very attractive young lady. And it was always kind of comical to be the second officer because you would watch the first person when the door opened. Typically, it was a male officer. And she's standing there in all her glory, and the officer is suddenly tongue-tied and can't remember who he is or why he's there. It's a funny story, but seriously, if she had had a gun behind her back or wanted to do something terrible to the officer, she had a second or two where she could have done that. So Again, I can't reiterate this enough. If somebody's naked, they're dangerous until proven otherwise. This gets us to really our first point here. When you're dealing with somebody who's naked, you don't do what you normally would. It's, as I said, it's uncomfortable, it's funny, distracting, it's weird, whatever word you choose to use. Most of us get a little hinky around naked people that you don't know. I will add that you don't know. For guys, same-sex encounters are especially uncomfortable, and you can talk about our stunted emotional development or whatever you want, but I'm here to tell you, dealing with another naked guy as a guy does tend to distract you and make you feel weird, and you start thinking about yourself and how you feel rather than worrying about dealing with that person and whatever their problem is. You know, as a cop, when you're confronting somebody in this situation, you got to close the gap and you got to deal with them a lot of the time. At the very least, you got to get them help. A lot of the times, you got to get them into handcuffs and make them stop doing whatever it was they were doing. But as a non-law enforcement person, your job mainly is to get away. The best thing you can do is remember, you don't have to take them into custody. You don't even have to help them. You need to get away, be safe, and if you have the time and opportunity, be a good witness. It doesn't hurt to dial 911, but your first job is to get away. You've got to realize that folks who don't have any clothes on probably are not in a rational frame of mind, so trying to talk with them or reason with them really goes out the window. You know, trying to tell them, hey, I'm calling the police, whether you mean to get them help or you need to get them away from you, is not going to work because at best, they'll understand somebody's coming to do something to them. Most of the time, though, they're worried about the robot Nazis that they think are chasing them, so they're probably not even going to listen to what you have to say. So it's not a bad thing to tell them you're going to get them some help, but don't get into a big dialogue, and certainly don't try to rationalize with them that, no, the sky is not purple and the robot Nazis are not waiting on the lawn and I'm not a large feathered lizard. You know, if that's what they think, get away, call 911, or do whatever you need to do to keep yourself and your friends and family safe. If you are dealing with them or you're having to talk with them and you realize mainly you just want to get away, the best thing to do, I've found, is deflect their attention. Ask them about where are those robot Nazis, or even better, hey, can you go outside and show me where those things are? And then you slam the door and lock it as soon as they go out. Since we're talking about a self-defense / CCW kind of scenario, there's a couple things to be thinking about here. First of all, never ever pull your gun to scare them. It's just not going to work. I've had countless people in introductory classes say, well, I don't know if I could actually shoot somebody. I would just scare them. Well, that doesn't work in the quote-unquote normal world. I guarantee you it will not work if somebody is drunk, high, or experiencing some kind of mental emotional crisis. At best, they'll ignore it. At worst, they'll grab the gun and use it on you. So trying to scare somebody with a firearm is bad advice across the board, but it is an especially bad idea in these situations when you're dealing with folks that are having some kind of crisis. Along the same note, trying to use verbal commands with them probably is not going to work either. You can tell them, stop, I'm armed, get on the ground, get away, get out of my house, and they're probably not going to do it. Now, having said that, you should still do it. A, maybe it will work, and you can stop a shooting before it happens. Or B, at least it helps your legal case. If somebody hears you repeatedly warning somebody, stop, I'm armed, get back, get out of my house, drop the knife, whatever it is you choose to say in a loud command, authority type of voice, it's not a bad idea to always do that. So just make sure in every type of situation like this that you're doing that, but don't expect it to work when you're dealing with somebody who's advancing on you and they don't have any clothes on. So let's talk about if you do have to go hands-on. Probably the biggest consideration is the fact that most of these folks are feeling no pain. Just like the old joke of, I'm feeling no pain after I've been to the bar. That's generally the state that these folks operate in. Whether they're drunk, high, mentally or emotionally embroiled, or psychologically out of touch. They don't feel pain. Cops are taught what's called pain compliance techniques, and the idea behind this is you apply them to someone and that person says, that hurts very badly. I need to either stop doing what I'm doing or do what the nice officer is telling me, and then the pain will go away. Well, with folks who are naked, they typically have one or many of these circumstances going on. They don't feel that pain. So we have to go from the idea of hurting them to actually physically breaking them down. So if you are going to fight with someone who doesn't have clothes on, you need to assume that they're feeling no pain, and it's just not going to be a matter of hitting them in the face because that won't hurt them. You're going to have to actually do something that'll put them on the ground. I've seen cases where guys have been hit with nightsticks really hard, the kind of thing that would, in most cases, take your leg and send it sailing to the fences. And one in particular, I remember he stopped fighting us and said, "Why did you do that?" It didn't hurt. He just wanted to know why the officer had hit him so hard with a nightstick. And then the fight was really on. So keep that in mind, that if you have to go hands-on, if you have to fight with somebody that's got no clothes on, there's a good chance you're going to have to physically put them down, not just make them feel pain.
And one final quick break for iPal. Here's a simple product for all iron sight shooters. Simply attach the static cling iPal peep sight to your eyewear and get a focused sight picture. Plain and simple, this inexpensive aperture resolves difficult vision issues. Go to ipalusa.com to get your kit today.
If you have to go hands-on, you need to keep a couple of ideas in mind. First of all, they're really, really slippery. It's trying to hold on to a naked guy in the middle of a fight's like trying to catch a greased porker with salad tongs. They're generally sweating because of the factors we've discussed before. And it's not just a little dampness. It's full on sweat flying like they're James Brown in the middle of a show. That mixes with their normal body oils and other things, and it makes it impossible to really get a good grip on them. And when I say the other things, blood and vomit are probably the least disgusting of the fluids they're often covered in. You can use your imagination to figure the rest out. But bottom line is they will be moist and they will be really slippery. And if they don't have any clothes on, there's nothing to hold on to like a shirt or a belt or anything like that. The other factor is if they're covered in who knows what, you'll probably be reluctant to touch them. Again, as a non-law enforcement person, you don't have to take them into custody, but if you got to fight them and you go down and you're wrestling, you got to realize you're probably going to get some stuff on you don't want to, and you have to take that out of your mind and just get on with business and deal with that afterwards. So let's wrap this thing up in a nice, neat bow. First and foremost, let me repeat for I think the third or fourth time, naked people should always set off alarm bells. If you see somebody walking naked down the street, it's not because they're an exhibitionist. Well, if you're in Key West, it could be, but most of the time, somebody walking down the street naked is a big problem. So it's incumbent on you not to gawk, don't stand there, and certainly don't try to help them. The only way you should help them is from a safe vantage point by calling 911 and let the professionals deal with them. I often joke that you should use the Eddie Eagle technique from the NRA, which is stop, don't touch, get away, tell an adult, or in this case, the police. If you do find yourself in a situation where you're up close and personal and having to deal with somebody, don't let their nudity fluster or embarrass you into taking chances you normally wouldn't. Focus solely on what do I need to do? Do I need to get away? Do I need to fight? Do I need to go to guns? That is all you need to be thinking about. Who cares what they do or don't look like without any clothes on? Keep in mind that guns or threats of violence will not scare them. The old, I'll rack my shotgun and they'll flee the house. Well, that may work with a novice burglar sometimes, but one of these folks, you tell them you're going to shoot them, you tell them you're going to hit them in the face with a brick, you tell them I've called the police and they're coming and a butt whipping will ensue. They don't care because they've got other bigger problems in their own head. So don't feel like guns or threats of violence is going to do anything to resolve the situation. And finally, if you have to fight, it's going to be ugly. There's not going to be a little bit of grappling or a little bit of fisticuffs, and then everybody will kind of step back and puff up and then walk away. If you go to fight with somebody in this situation, you'll have a hard time hanging on to them. They'll be slippery. They'll be covered in icky, gross stuff, and you're probably going to have to hurt them rather than just give them some pain. So bottom line is, don't get in a fight with them. Don't even engage them. Disengage yourself as best you can do. Get away from them, call the authorities, and let them deal with them. And finally, with all things tactical, all things self-defense, remember that training is critical. I'd suggest maybe the Cheetah Club in Las Vegas. I mean, I've heard that's a good place to train for dealing with naked people. Today, I hope you learned something, or at least you got a mildly immoral chuckle out of the whole thing. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also listen to episode 90, where I talk to trainer Steve Tarani about soft skills. You might also like episode number 139, where Roy Huntington and I talk about cop practical jokes, or episode number 154, where we dissect the myths and legends of cop choir practice. If there's a topic you want to hear, someone you'd like us to interview, or you want to share your thoughts, please drop me a line at editor@gunsmagazine.com. As always, you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast directory, such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, and several others. And you can always get the latest episode on YouTube and at gunsmagazine.com. At the same time, please subscribe to the Gun Cranks audio podcast on those same directories, or you can watch it at the Gun Cranks YouTube channel. I'd also ask you to visit our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and don't forget our numerous special editions available for sale on our websites and at Amazon. Before we go, I'd also like to remind you to visit our sponsor, 4 Patriots. You can find out more about their food kits and other preparedness supplies at 4patriots.com. That's the number 4, the word Patriots, and .com. And please don't forget our supporting sponsor, Creedmoor Sports. Visit them at creedmoorsports.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine Editor Brent T. Now get out there and get shooting.